Welcome, everyone. We hope you guys are all doing well and keeping safe in these unusual times we're going through. My name here is Jeff Holdenred. I'm the VP of Sales and Engineering at Double Radius. We want to start off by thanking you for taking the time to join us today for this webinar on ultra high capacity and affordable backhauls from AL Wireless. For those of you that are not familiar with AL Wireless, they specialize in microwave and millimeter wave links and provide service to over 160 countries worldwide. Joining us today for this presentation is Mark Reynolds, the president of RF Datacom. Mark comes to us today with a lifetime of information and experience in this industry. In the 20 years that I've been doing this, I've known him for approximately 18 of those. So he definitely comes with a lot of background and expertise in this field. Before I turn it over to Mark, I just have a few housekeeping things I want to go over. If you have questions throughout the presentation, in your GoToWebinar control panel on the right, you will see a questions drop-down. Please enter your questions there, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. When the webinar is over, please take a minute or two and provide us with feedback, answer the questions. These answers provide us the information we need to make sure that these are valuable presentations for you and so that we can bring as much possible to the table. And with all that being said, let's jump right in. I'm going to turn this over to Mark.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. Really looking forward to giving you a little bit of background on AL Wireless and how their radios can help you increase capacity across your network. So let's get started. AL Wireless is based in the Czech Republic. They're a European manufacturing company. They were founded in 1993, and many of you may know them formerly as Alcoma. So they have a lot of experience. These guys started their company from the ground up way back when, as soon as communism ended, and have been developing awesome platforms since that time frame. Certainly European quality is a great thing to have. Like Jeff said earlier, this equipment's been deployed in over 160 countries. Here in the US, we've had really strong success with mobile operators, military, wireless ISPs, utilities, other government entities, and enterprise networks, large enterprise. So we run the gamut of supplying equipment to the usual suspects of microwave and millimeter wave users. And as you can guess, many of these customers are not price-based. They are strictly technology-based companies. So I think that's more important to learn here is we're not just coming out with the most affordable radio, but we're coming out with a high-quality carrier mil-grade radio that, again, that customer base is not price-sensitive. Even though they're a European company, we have US-based customer support. It's based in Massachusetts. It's available from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern time. Probably later in the evening. The team's pretty good there. And if it needs to kick over to the European headquarters, that's available 24/7, and they speak terrific English. It's available both via phone call and email. So you're covered as far as any questions or issues you may have with the microwave radio system. We're local for you, and you can always reach us. Let me go back one. The platform that we're talking about is the Zenith X Platform. It's the second generation of Zenith microwave radios that the company has offered in the United States. Starting out, some pretty cool major features with this platform. It's available in all the FCC license bands from 6, 11, 18, and 23 gigahertz. Should the FCC open up some new bands, and there's been talk about opening up 7 and 13, those are frequency bands that are manufactured and available. It won't be a problem to introduce those bands if they should be allowed in the future. It's good to know that there's a lot of flexibility. Modulation rate goes from the basic QPSK all the way up to the most advanced on the market today, 4096 QAM, which allows you to squeeze a lot of data through the pipes that are available. We all know that spectrum is becoming less and less available. So modulation is one of the ways to increase your capacity. The radios offer really high transmit power up to 27 dBm. The ATPC is automatic power control, automatic transmit power control. What that means is the radios can increase power as they go down in modulation. And that's the same with automatic coding and modulation. So they work in conjunction. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, that means should you enter a rain fade event, the radios will drop back in modulation, meaning you'll have a slight hit, lower your bandwidth to some degree, not a lot, and the radios will become more robust in transmitting your data. So it's instead of getting into a rain fade situation where the link goes dead, you'll only notice a small decrease in capacity to the point where your customers probably won't even see it. When we do our path calculations, we give you the bandwidth that you will expect over every modulation, as well as what your path availability will be over every modulation. So you may see at full 4096 QAM, you might have, say, an hour of downtime per year, and then you may drop down to a different modulation and you'll have, say, 45 minutes of downtime, but your bandwidth will drop from a gig down to, say, 850 megabits for that 40 minutes. So it's a really couple of good tools that work in conjunction to keep your link alive should you encounter severe rain fade. Bandwidth is available in many different channel sizes, all the way up to 240 megahertz using ultra-wide channels. Most people tend to use an 80 megahertz standard FCC channel, but if you do decide to use different channels, it's something to talk about with your frequency coordinator to determine how you want to go about that. But for the most part, most customers will use a combination of one or two 80 megahertz channels. But to let you know that a lot of manufacturers now offer ultra channels. The Zenith X line offers the widest ultra channel available, up to 240 megahertz, meaning you can pump a lot more bandwidth through the radio using an ultra channel. The radios are available in both single transceiver and dual transceiver. And what that really means is a single transceiver has one radio, transmit and receive radio, inside of the chassis, whereas a dual basically has two separate radio cards inside of a single transceiver. So one radio or two radios. Some people may call the dual transceiver an XPick radio, and that would be somewhat accurate. You do need a dual transceiver to run XPick. A couple of ways that you can connect these radios to your antenna would be either an OMT, which is a type of coupler, a standard coupler, or a waveguide output. If you notice on the right-hand side, the dual waveguide, it's a feature that some people want in their radios. Stack subcarrier operation, which doubles your capacity without adding any hardware. This is really a game changer in the industry. Customer replaceable diplexers, which we'll go into, multi-channel operation, some advanced Ethernet features such as header and payload compression, radio link aggregation, and the management pipe, which is management platform, which is you can run that as a basic pipe, simple, let your switches do everything, or you can offer some really full advanced Ethernet features, many that the larger carriers want to use. So that's the basic overview. SubCarrier features, these are a real game changer for the industry. What this allows you to do is take a standard radio, say a single core radio, single transceiver radio, and run two independent FCC channels on there. It will allow you to run up to 112 megahertz for each channel. The majority of the customers will run two separate 80 megahertz channels, which are readily available and licensed through your frequency coordinator. So think of it this way. You buy a standard radio, and this equals what most competitors run in their dual carrier or dual core radio. So we're doubling up without adding any hardware or hardware cost. So this is a significant cost reduction and allows you to pump a lot more bandwidth through the radio. Take that to the next level. And when we're using a dual transceiver radio, you can actually run 4 independent subcarriers over that radio. So it doubles what a standard dual carrier would give you. Again, this is a huge game changer for people that are deploying microwave radios, because now you're doubling your bandwidth without doubling your cost. And this is something that especially wireless ISPs can get a tremendous advantage over using a competitive radio. We'll talk about that a little more. The radios also offer XPick configuration. So in this particular diagram, we are seeing a 4-channel XPick radio. So each carrier will allow you to have 2 subbands. So like I said earlier, this diagram demonstrates how you will be able to get quad channels through a single ODU into a single antenna. So really saves on your install and operating costs. It makes it easy for your network requirements, and it provides the ability to do link aggregation, which talk about a little bit more, but basically it allows you to run a single cable and the radio will make the decisions on how to provision bandwidth going across the 4 subcarrier channels. I'm sure there'll be some questions on that and we'll clarify at the end. So we have low-cost bandwidth keys. The radio, a single transceiver radio, the standard out of the box is 100 megabits, and you can purchase a key all the way up to 2 gigabits full duplex from double radius. And the bandwidth is sold in 100 megabit increments. So depending upon your FCC license, if you're able to say get a 1.4 or a 1.9 gigabit license, you're now able to just license the bandwidth you need. The other nice feature is that if you don't need, say you need 500 megabits out of the gates, 700 megabits out of the gates, if you want to increase that capacity, you can always do so. So if you want to save a little bit money when you first start with the radio, just make a call to double radius, purchase the extra bandwidth, and you receive a software key and squirt that into your radio, and in seconds, you'll now have your increased capacity. Most people buy the full capacity that they want at the beginning, but again, it's your money. You can choose how you want to spend it. The same goes for the dual transceiver model. Starts with 200 megabits, basically 2 separate radios, and you can double that up to 4 gig. So it future-proofs your radios, future-proofs your network requirements, and increase your bandwidth without buying more hardware. You can do that down the road should you like. Link aggregation for multi-carrier operation. So this can operate on a layer 1 or a layer 2 to get your traffic through on a single cable. So this is a nice feature. Say the old version of an XPick radio, you had to run 2 separate data cables up to the radio, and then those data cables would go back into the switch, and your switch would make that decision on how it wants to load balance that traffic going across the link. With link aggregation, it allows you just to run one cable up to the ODU, and the ODU will make the decision on how it wants to multiplex and demultiplex that signal going across the link. So depends upon the type of switch you're using. If you want to use a less expensive switch that can handle higher capacity, this may be an option for you. If you want to use a sophisticated switch and manage that traffic yourself, fine. that's really up to you and how you want to run your network, but it's a pretty cool option if you want to use it. We do offer, as I mentioned earlier, wide channel operation. That allows you, if you get multiple licenses with wide channel, you would need to get, you could get, say, an 80 megahertz and an adjacent 40 megahertz, or you could get 3 adjacent 80 megahertz channels. It's really up to you how you want to operate the radio, and working with your frequency coordinator, they can tell you how they would like to set it up. Are there frequencies available? Do they recommend you using this type of configuration? What we're saying, it's available, and it allows the operator to determine how they want to run their network. And we strongly recommend, again, working with your frequency coordinator to determine the best way for you to deploy this particular radio. So what that allows you to do is, with a single DT radio, dual transceiver radio, using XPick, using the wide channel operation, you can literally get measured 4 gigabits throughput. And that, again, is a game changer. You're responsible for getting the licenses to do it. And that's really the gating factor, is how much spectrum you can get. But should you be able to get the spectrum, the radio will allow you to go up to a true 4 gigabits. And this is with a standard direct attachment antenna. So you don't have to buy 2 antennas or get really fancy or anything like that. It just allows you to have a single antenna connection to that ODU. So it makes it easy. There's no waveguide or anything else that's required to do this. It's a slip fit. And this, again, reduces any interchannel interference, and sometimes multi-channel radios have this problem. With the AL wireless Zenith line, that doesn't happen, so you have a much cleaner signal. And I just do want to point out that ultra channels are non-standard FCC channels. Again, it's really important you work with your frequency coordinator to determine what spectrum is available and how you want to use that. So this gives you a little comparison on an ultra wide versus the traditional radio. If you want to use a competitive model, it would be called the 4+0 XPick radio. And what that would mean is you'd need 2 separate XPick radios to do this. And you'd be able to get 4 80 megahertz channels through that. It would cost you a heck of a lot of money, and you'd need a lot of couplers and cables to make that work. It's not a kludgy solution, but it is a very complex solution. You'll need a dual feed antenna. You'll need a lot of waveguide. There's a lot of plumbing involved if you want to do that particular application. It will work, but the Zenith X offers that in a much cleaner situation. You can use 240 megahertz channels in an XPick and get a true 4 gig solution. So it offers a lot of flexibility. And again, it's a single antenna, single cable install. So as far as making it easy, it certainly does that. So you can also run ultra wide channel operation, and we would call that a 2+0 XPick radio. So what that is, if you can see the diagram on the left side, you actually take 2 DT radios and connect them into an OMT coupler, and it allows you to use a single antenna to pump 8 gigabits without any compression. So if you can get the spectrum, the radio will do this for you, up to 8 gig. And if you want to add compression, there's a feature for that, and get yourself up to 10 gig. I do want to point out that compression doesn't really work well for video. So video streaming, I don't think it's worthwhile, but for other types of application, compression may be for your network. But again, this is 2 separate DT radios, and it's really, if you look at it, it's a 4+0 XPick with wide channels. And If you can get the FCC bandwidth, these radios will pump out tons of bandwidth. And it allows you to grow your network. Should you start with a standard DT radio and you find more spectrum out there, well, you can use that spectrum and add in that second ODU in the future if you want. So you don't have to buy it all at once. And again, future-proof that if you can get spectrum. Custom replaceable diplexers. So this is pretty cool. It allows you to keep your spares pool down. In the 6 gigahertz band, there are actually 3 sub-bands. So that would be 3 separate diplexers. In the 11 gigahertz band, there are 2 diplexers band, a high and a low sub-band. And in 18 gigahertz, there is no sub-band. There's just one diplexer. So say you have multiple channels out there. You're using a high and low band in your 11 gig. Instead of having to buy multiple ODUs, this allows you to field replace this diplexer, and it keeps your spares cost way down, way down. And it's a nice feature. It's not something that's too hard. It's certainly something that the average installer, if you can install this, you can change out the diplexers. And it's a nice feature, depending upon what you're using. So one spare ODU takes care of everything. One spare ODU and 11 gig will cover all of your spare requirements. Previously, you'd need 4. How you can order the antennas, power, and interface. So the Zenith can be ordered with 1 to 4 foot antennas that's sold through AL Wireless. If you want to go with something larger, say you have a 6 gig radio and you want to use a 6 foot, 8 foot, whatever, Double Radius can sell that to you separately. And we can either use a Remix circular slip fit antenna, or we can offer adapters that will fit any brand antenna. And that's also nice. Say you have a 3 foot 11 gig antenna out there, fits a Remic. Well, what this allows you to do is keep your existing antenna, and we can plug in the new radio seamlessly. No separate hardware. Or should you want to use your existing antenna, we do have adapters that will allow you to do that. And you use a waveguide connection, and you'll mount the ODU to a separate mount that only holds the ODU with no antenna. It works fine if you don't want to go up on a tower and realign a 4 foot dish or something like that. It's certainly an option, and you don't have to pay for that new antenna. So again, keeping your costs down. We've thought a lot about how you folks install, and this makes it easy. It's just another feature that you have. As far as powering the radios, you can power the radios via separate DC cable, and or you can use copper SFP and run PoE into that. We strongly recommend using Cat7 shielded cable if you're starting to get into this will take a 10 gig SFP using copper. So we'd like you to use Cat7 if you do want to use copper, and pretty much limit your cable length to 30 meters. Beyond that, we really wish you'd use fiber. It's a much cleaner signal. That's what most people are doing. Available interfaces for the radio would be a 1 gig SFP. Typically, you'd be using that or the 2.5 gig SFP on the single carrier radio. And as soon as you get into the dual carrier radio, you can use a single or a dual SFP, and you can mix and match those SFPs, single mode, multi-mode, or copper. You may want to have a copper SFP for out-of-band management and PoE power, and then a fiber SFP for your data. So it's up to you. The 2 SFPs for the 10 gig also allow you, if you don't want to use data aggregation, link aggregation, you can use your router to do that and run 2 separate cables and 2 separate SFPs. So again, more flexibility depending upon how the operator wants to set up their network and what switches they're using on their network. I put together a simple bill of materials. You want to order these radios. Well, what do you need? So if you buy a single transceiver, this is more or less the checklist that you should have for Double Radius for their sales team. And if you have any unanswered questions, the folks at Double Radius are really strong in microwave, and they can help you through this and guide you to make the right decisions. But for the most part, here's the overview when you buy your radio. You choose your frequency band, whether it's 6, 11, 18, 23. You choose how much bandwidth you want to purchase out of the gates. And again, your maximum is going to be based on what you can license from the FCC. Choose your SFP interface, whether it's a 1 or 2.5 gig copper or fiber, single mode, multi-mode. Choose if you want to use the subcarrier option. And again, that is, do I want to license 2 individual 80 gig channels to run into this radio, which doubles your bandwidth? That's the subcarrier, is the bandwidth doubler. Do you want to use that? And that is used when you license 2 non-adjacent FCC frequencies. Now, you can use the subcarrier. I mean, you won't need the subcarrier feature if you only use a standard 80 megahertz channel. Should you decide to add a second 80 gigahertz channel, you'll then add in the subcarrier, and as long as it is in the same band, so if you're using an 11 high, as long as your separate frequency pair falls into the 11 high, you can run that non-adjacent and double your bandwidth. So again, working with your FCC coordinator to make sure that your subcarriers work in the same band is critical. The other thing you can choose is the ultra channel, and that is used for adjacent frequencies. Some customers will choose to license an 80 megahertz channel, and maybe there's a 40 megahertz channel adjacent to that, and they will try to license 120 megahertz of spectrum. If they do that, we can now run the the ultra channel at 112 megahertz capacity. And what that does is it takes you from 700 megabits to 940 megabits if you can get that extra 40 megahertz adjacent channel. Cool thing is you can use the subcarrier and the ultra channel simultaneously. What does that mean? Means, okay, I can license 2 separate 120 megahertz channels, and we can run them as a subcarrier feature over the single carrier radio. Net, that gets you 2 gigabits of spectrum, 2 gigabits of bandwidth, full duplex, through a standard single transceiver radio. So ultra channel plus subcarrier can get you all the way up to 2 gigabits. Subcarrier, 2 subcarriers with no ultra channel will get you 1.4 gigabits full duplex transport. There's also some advanced Ethernet features you can choose or not choose, depending upon your radio, anywhere from 1588 to SYNC, MSTP, RSTP, and data header compression. All of those come as a single option with advanced Ethernet. So should your switch, do you want that, or do you want the AL wireless to do that work for you? It depends upon how you set up the pipe. The next choice you're going to have is your antenna size. What do you need for that particular path distance and reliability that you're trying to achieve? Should be noted, if you're not aware of this, guys, that you can mix and match antenna sizes. So you may, for restrictions on one side or cost for one side, maybe you want to put in a 2-foot on one side and a 3-foot on the other side. That's perfectly acceptable, and we will do the path analysis to show you exactly how it plays out. But it's a common everyday occurrence. Don't feel like you have to use the same antenna sizes on both ends. Power options, again, you can run DC with fiber and or copper SFP if you want to use PoE. So it's very straightforward. It gives you a lot of options, and these are the questions you'll have to answer for the double radius sales team when you call in. You should have an idea. And if you don't know bandwidth license, or if you don't know about subcarriers, they can go into this in far more detail. Like I said, they're really skilled, and they can make recommendations on how to order. But again, these are the sample bill of materials and the questions that you should have answered when you go to purchase the radio. Dual transceiver model. Again, you choose the band, the FCC license, your interface. Do you want XPick or not? XPick is not required because you can use the subbands to take the place of XPick. So for those of you not familiar with XPick, you use the same horizontal and vertical frequencies, the same frequency for both horizontal and vertical polarization. So when you get your license, if the frequency coordinator can get you frequency pair, whatever that is, and you can then use that same pair on both polarizations. If you don't want to use an XPick radio, you can use a subcarrier radio, and you would end up using 4 independent frequency pairs. So it can be done with 2 pairs on horizontal and vertical, or it can be done with 4 independent pairs if you can get those licenses. Again, we can use the ultra channel on this particular radio, and the subcarrier and ultra channel may be used simultaneously. So for instance, you could actually have 4 112 megahertz channels running through that radio, and that would get you, when you chose your bandwidth, you would choose the 2 gigabit function. And with this, again, you can choose radio link aggregation for a single pair of data cables. And it can be done either on the physical layer, layer 1, or it can be done on layer 2, depending upon how you want to set up your pipe. And layer 1 is obviously the most simple, basically a media converter type of pipe. Layer 2, you'll get into more Ethernet functions. You can decide to order the advanced Ethernet function on this radio. Same thing with choosing your antenna size and power options. So these are really the questions that you need to answer when you go to place an order. Do I need a single transceiver? Do I need a dual transceiver? Many competitors, when you go to order a dual transceiver, with us, you'll only need that single transceiver and the cost of a single transceiver versus the dual. So in addition to AO Wireless having low-cost equipment, one of the reasons is, besides you can double down on your capacity, is that unlike a lot of competitors, we really focus in on technology. We don't go out and focus a heck of a lot of money on trade shows. You don't see us going out and doing a lot of personal appearances at customer locations. We won't be coming out and buying steak dinners for customers or anything like that, taking you golfing, because at the end of the day, that money really, especially salespeople and VPs and all the other support functions that you pay for, we just don't have that in the US. And that allows us to go out and give you operators the most aggressive pricing in the marketplace. I like to tell my customers, guys, you don't need us to call you once a week and say, do you need to buy a new radio? We'll pretty much only contact you when new features or software comes out. We want to make you aware of that. But for the most part, after you buy your first radio, after that operator has that radio up and running, they know it works well. And we don't need to spend all that extra sales money convincing you that a radio is working well. You know that, you're smart guys, you built your networks, and we're not an overly salesy company is what I want to say. We're totally focused in on the technology experience for you and keeping that cost down and allowing you to grow your network with us. Again, my name is Mark Reynolds. I work for RF Datacom. What my company does is we build channels for AL Wireless in the US and Canada. That's strictly our mission. AL Wireless, like I said, does not have a team of sales reps that come over here and bang on your door once a week asking you to place a purchase order. We kind of just give you the information, get that first radio in your hands. Hopefully you fall in love with it and say, gee, this is the solution for my network. I can build my network around this, and we'll work with you on ongoing orders. But we're not going to be pests or anything like that. You guys are adults, you know what you need. And for the most part, if you have purchasing questions, they're really, and pricing questions, that's all handled through Double Radius. And we're very happy to be working with such a professional firm. They can answer drill down questions just about as well as we can. They're fully trained on the radios. Their staff is well versed in every brand and is able to make distinctions between us and others. So they'll give you a fair and honest representation of even our competitors. We're not afraid of our competitors, and we're more than happy to have Double Radius point out any differences. And of course, if there are technical issues or questions, feel free to call me. We can point you in the right direction for service and support or any other technical questions you may have. Didn't want to take up a lot of your time today. Most of you folks know microwave pretty well. I've installed licensed links in the past. So we'd like to get into some questions and see what more you'd like to know about this. So yeah, let's open the floor up to questions.
Yeah, I got a couple here. This is Caleb, by the way. A couple here that folks are asking. So on the subcarrier mode, the earlier slide said that they're non-adjacent channels. Can you explain, what the channel spacing? Do you have to have one channel gap between it, or how that works out?
Yeah, typically a one channel gap. It's a good question. Typically a one channel gap is what we're looking for to provide that frequency isolation, separation between the two bands.
Okay.
And
cool.
let me just follow up with that a little bit. When you're looking for that, depending upon who you're working with, whether it's Intel Path, Micronet, ComSearch, or whoever you're working with your frequency coordinator, it's really good if you can ask that group to contact us and we can help steer them in the right direction. So don't feel that there are two separate ways to go about this. We work hand in hand with the frequency coordinators so that when you get your radios, there's no surprise in saying, oh, wait a second, we don't have the right guard band between this, or whatever the case may be. We want to work closely with them to make sure that when the radio is delivered, okay, yep, everything works out of the box, it's perfect, everything's set up to go. But as Caleb said, we do like to have one channel separation.
Okay. Another question real quick. Mechanically, the field replaceable diplexer, that applies to both single and the dual. Does that bolt onto the front? Is it inserted in the chassis? How fussy is that process?
It's very straightforward. It bolts onto the back where it right before you connect into the antenna.
Okay.
It's very here's a cool little feature that other manufacturers certainly don't offer. We haven't seen it ordered, but this is an option. It's not going to be stocked at Double Radius. It's a special order. But should you want to get, I can only get one channel at 11 gigahertz, and I can get another channel at 18 gigahertz. Well, guess what? In that same dual transceiver radio, we can mix frequencies. Or let's say you want an 11, you can only get an 11 high with one, and we can get an 11 low. We can mix that inside of the transceiver so that you're not stuck having to use the same bands or even frequencies. You could have a 23 and an 18 if you wanted to. Again, that may just boil down to what spectrum is available and working with your coordinator. And okay, you may not get the exact same path reliability that you would with an 11 and an 18. There may be some slight differences. But heck, if you're looking for more bandwidth and that's the only way to do it, because you may have a very congested RF environment, This allows you to mix and match. So don't think that you're dead in the water. Oh, I can only get one 11 gig frequency. Well, you might only be able to do that, but we can maybe find an 18 right in the same area, and now you can run that dual transceiver with 2 different frequencies and use the same antenna.
All right, and then actually the last question here was just confirmation that I can answer is the dual core unit or the DT unit comes with SFP plus standard, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Good question there.
Buy the DT model, we'll probably want to buy the 10 gig SFP. That's the most common, and most common is a fiber, although like I said earlier, we do offer a 10 gig copper SFP. I'm not the biggest fan of copper, but I know a lot of guys out there like to run copper and just do a single cable install. There's nothing wrong with that, but I urge people when they do that to keep that to 30 meters, just because it gets, your jitter can really pick up when you start getting longer than that.
Right. Okay. All right, yeah, that's it for the questions here. So I think we're good there.
I do want to mention that Double Radius has ample stock, and they are ready to take orders and ship immediately to you folks.
All right, Mark, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this with us today. I want to thank all of you all for joining us today for this webinar. If you could please, as we close this out, please take a minute to fill out the survey. If you have any other questions, or a lot of times you'll digest this information and questions will come to you later on, please hit up Double Radius and your rep, and we'll be glad to get you the answers if we don't already have them. And stay safe, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you very much.